Hello, thanks for joining me today and welcome back to the DarkForgecraft server. This is Danny and this is my base. And today we are going to be playing with a mod that I have not played with yet on this server, and that is PneumaticCraft. PneumaticCraft, if you haven't played with it before, is a mod that is based on compressed air. Here's some of the items. And it has a lot of really cool objects and blocks and things that we can do some nice stuff with, like a helmet that is kind of like the Iron Man helmet where you can see stuff, overlays of information of the world around you. It's also got these drones, which are almost like computer craft turtles, but they're much easier to program. There have been, now if you played with PneumaticCraft in the past, there have been a few changes. Well, one kind of major change, and that is there used to be flowers that generate in the world. Those no longer exist. You used to use them to make plastics, and now we can use oil to make plastics. Got some TNT, and some iron ingots, and a flint and steel. We are going to make chicken. What are you doing, dude? We are going to make ourselves some compressed iron. Look out, big nose sheep. What the heck? I'll take that chicken too, why not? So we just made ourselves some compressed iron. No, you can make compressed iron in a compression chamber. However, in order to make the compression chamber, there's our compressed iron, we have to make compressed iron. And you might notice that we only have 44 compressed iron and we started out with 50 some iron. So this process of the explosion is inefficient, but once we get a compression chamber up, we will no longer have that inefficiency. PneumaticCraft has these really cool elevators. And that's kind of going to be my goal today, is to make one of those because I think they're really cool. I mean, we have our open blocks elevators here, which are pretty neat. You know, you stand on them and you hit shift and you suddenly appear on the elevator in front of, or that's above it or below it. Very cool, very minimalist, which is nice, kind of stays out of the way. The PneumaticCraft elevators actually have a shaft, and they actually have little blocks that show you the different floors, and you can press the button to select the floor that you want, and then you will move. It actually works like a real elevator. The elevator thing moves, a little block kind of thing, moves up the elevator shaft, carrying you with it. Whee! And it's pretty neat. So it's the same functionality, but it's just a lot more fun. So we're going to do that today. Before we can do anything, we're going to need to build an air compressor. So we start out with our pressure tubes, which are just our compressed iron that we just made, and some glass. So those are pretty cheap. And then the air compressor, which we're going to need a furnace for. And building up the pressure. I'm ready to get started with PneumaticCraft. I made myself a little side room over here, and I kind of have it separated from the rest of the base for a couple reasons. One, because the look the look doesn't really fit what the look that the rest of the base is, and there's a little added bonus when we're working with PneumaticCraft, and that is that these machines are dangerous. We have to keep them balanced because remember I said these things work with pressure, air pressure. Oh, we need some more pressure tubes. So this is our first basic machine that we need to build, and that's an air compressor. The air compressor compresses air when you put coal in it. So we put coal in here and it starts to build up some air pressure. If it builds up too much air pressure, if it ends up in the red zone, it blows up. So So we are going to be setting up a few safety measures in order to prevent that from happening, but if for whatever reason it does happen to happen, at least it won't be in our base blowing things up and destroying our stuff. If you've ever worked with air pressure in real life, this might seem a little familiar to you. you have a little machine that runs on something, and then it produces air pressure, which comes shooting out the other end of the tube. But of course, the system has to be closed, otherwise it's just going to be wasting air pressure. And actually, what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to make a loop here. And now the system is closed. So if we look at this, we will see that our air pressure is beginning to build. And of course, it builds very slowly because we only have this one basic air pressure. So we really don't have to worry much about it blowing up on us anytime soon, but it's just a matter of time before it would generate enough pressure to blow up. So I've got a couple of extra blocks here that I created. One of these is a pressure gauge. So I'm going to put it on this tube. And this will tell us how much pressure is in our system. But what it also does is it emits a redstone signal based on how much pressure we have in the system. So if we stick a piece of redstone here, we will see that right now it's emitting a redstone signal of 2, which means that we have 1 bar of pressure. So then we also have this safety tube, which is another module we can stick right on the pipe. And what this guy will do is it will open up and let air out. Will let pressure out when it reaches a particular threshold, which of course is inefficient. It will cause us to lose pressure. Actually, let's take that out for now so we don't blow up while I'm talking. It'll cause the system to lose pressure and thus lose the energy that was put into it. However, it can prevent the system from overflowing or blowing up if something goes wrong. So right now the threshold is set at 7.5 bar. You can see in Wela at the bottom, and applied redstone is 0. And what this thing will do is you apply a particular redstone strength to it, and that will change the threshold. So if you apply a redstone signal of 1 to it, it's going to reduce the threshold by a half a bar. So if we wanted to bring this down, let's say to 4.5 bar, we would apply 3 redstone to it. The formula is 7.5 minus the redstone signal divided by 2. Got a pressure gauge on the bottom of this tube right here, and it is pointing at this redstone receiver, the Steve's Factory Manager redstone receiver. And then over here, I've got a pressure valve, a safety tube pointing down at this redstone emitter. So let's start with the pressure gauge pointing at the redstone receiver. I've got Steve's Factory Manager blocks all under here. So we've got the inventory cables connecting all the different blocks together on the floor. Underneath the air compressor, I've got a redstone emitter. And then if we look in our machine inventory manager, we'll see I've got 2 programs running here. Let's look at this one first. This is a trigger that just runs every second. Probably doesn't need to run it every second. It could probably run every few seconds, but it's a condition, and it's checking the redstone receiver. This redstone receiver that the pressure gauge is pointing to. It's going to do a redstone signal of 1 per every half bar. So these are our bars of pressure, and this thing can hold up to 5 bars of pressure. When we get into the red zone, it has a risk. It may blow up. And the longer it stays in the red zone, the more likely it will be to explode. And it actually breaks blocks like TNT. I mean, it'll cause a real explosion. These lines actually can explode as well. As you can see when we hover over them, it says max pressure is 5 bar. The current pressure is 4.2. So this guy right now, because the current pressure is 4.2, it is emitting redstone of 8. So this guy is checking to see the redstone strength is anywhere between 8 and 15. So in other words, 8 or greater, because 15 is the max. So if the redstone signal is 8 or greater, it's going to emit a redstone signal to the redstone emitter, which is underneath the air compressor. and it'll output a redstone strength of 15. And then we have an emitter, and then if it's false, if it's not between 8 and 15, so in other words, there's less pressure in the line than 4 bar, it will emit to the same redstone emitter, the one that's underneath that thing, 0. So in other words, it'll cut off the redstone signal and it'll begin to work again. So then over here, we've got another redstone emitter, and this thing is only doing one thing. All it's doing is it's emitting a redstone signal of 6 all the time. Never changes. So I figured since we're using Steve's Factory Manager blocks down here, I might as well just, this is one of the easiest ways I know of to be able to emit a specific redstone signal using a single block. So that's what it's doing. It's emitting a redstone signal of 6 to this safety tube monitor. If you look at Wayla, it's telling us that, of course, the max pressure for this guy is 5. Any more than that, it will explode. The pressure right now is 4.2. The applied redstone is 6. And the threshold is 4.5 bar. So what this guy does, if we remove the redstone signal, not going to change unless we tell it to change. So if we change the redstone signal to 0, we will see that this guy is now emitting no redstone, and this guy has applied redstone of 0, and the threshold is 7.5 bar. The threshold tells us at what point this safety tube is going to open and release pressure from the system. So right now, it won't do that until it reaches 7.5 bar, and by that time, something will have exploded, so it will never release pressure, basically, until it explodes. We don't want that. So when we apply redstone to it, it will take half the redstone strength and subtract it from 7.5. So when we apply, so let's say we apply 8 to this guy. Oops, no, that is 4. 8. All of a sudden it's releasing pressure because its threshold is now 3.5. So now what's going to happen actually is our pressure in our system is dropping right now. We're actually wasting pressure right now. And our air compressor has kicked in because this guy is no longer at 4 bar, so it's now cut off the redstone signal to our air compressor, which is now producing air pressure again. And it's hanging right at 3.5 bar. And you can hear this guy is intermittently letting out air because every time the pressure hits 3.5 it lets out air, and then when it drops it stops. so it's maintaining a pressure of 3.5 in this line. However, it's wasting all the pressure that's being used. So if we set this guy to 6 like I had it before, this guy will then set its threshold to 4.5, which is really just kind of a safety measure. So that means this guy's going to cut off, or it's going to send a redstone signal here. So this guy's actually going to stop adding pressure to the system once it reaches 4 bar. Although if it's still in the middle of burning a piece of coal, it's still going to continue burning that piece of coal. So the pressure is usually going to end up being a little more than 4 by the time it stops. So this is really just kind of a safety measure, just in case the pressure would happen to get above 4.5. We have a basic pressure system in place. What can we do with this? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a pressure chamber. This is a multi-block structure. I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to do a 3 by 3. Oh, it covers up a 3 by 3 by. So if we right click on it, we get this little interface with some upgrade slots and a pressure gauge. So now if we hook, I've got the pressure valve on the side. And if we hook that guy up, we're going to lose pressure over here because the air pressure is going to be heading into this thing. And the system is kind of balancing itself out right now. So pressure from there is going into here, and eventually it will balance out, and you can see our air compressor is running again now. because this guy has stopped the redstone signal because our pressure has dropped. And I'm actually going to get rid of these because we don't really need this loop here anymore. There, now we can start making stuff in here. So to get stuff in here, we could just break this thing and drop an item in there and then put it back together and it will work. However, because we have these pressure chamber interfaces on here, we can pipe stuff in. Right now I'll just use a hopper for the time being. So if we drop a couple of pieces of iron in there, we'll see they will actually, the little thing has a door on the side, so it opens one door at a time, drops the item in, and then it immediately drops it back out from our output pressure chamber, which, actually let's put that there. And that's not really what we want, right? It just drops the iron right back out. Oh, but this time it's compressed because it happened to be in there long enough. So the problem here is that our output interface doesn't have any filters on it. So we're going to want to filter it and say we only want it to give us compressed iron ingots. So that way, if we put our hopper back on here and then drop that guy in there, it's gonna bring it in there, and it'll wait there until it's a compressed iron ingot, at which point it will come out here. We're ready to move on to our next tier, I guess you could say, and that would be the production of plastics. Oh, and by the way, on a side note, the pressure tubes are microblock compatible, which is pretty cool. See? They do fit in the same blocks as microblocks, although do make sure that you use a hollow cover. Otherwise, you will sever the connection here and lose all of your pressure. I've got a vortex tube and some pipes. I have not made the final connection yet. I always find that it's best to make your final connection connecting to the rest of the network last, because you don't want to be doing pipes starting with your existing network, because then you'll be losing pressure. So what this guy does is it takes air pressure, of course, and it basically splits the hot from the cold. So one end of this guy is really, really hot, and the other end is really, really cold. And there are different machines that use heat, and there are other machines that use cold for like coolant, for like cooling and stuff. Machines that would get hot, you would use the cold side to cool them. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be setting up a refinery. The refinery actually works with heat. And as you can see, I've got a tank of oil here. It's hooked up to a tesseract, which I have another tesseract over there pumping some oil. I have a pump on the tesseract pumping oil. Let's close this up. And then again, we can use our microblock covers to cover that. And then, of course, we would have to use a hollow cover there. Crap. Oh, whatever. I'll do that later. So we stick our refinery right there, and it will use the heat. And I'm going to stack 4 of these on top of each other. And the reason I'm going to stack 4 of these on top of each other, this guy is going to take oil and it's going to refine it into 4 different components. We will see that a refinery is used to process oil into different fuels, sorted from heavy to light. So diesel, kerosene, gasoline, LPG. The LPG is what we're going to use to make plastic. To pull, to extract oil from here. Always active. And to insert it over here. Yay, black gold. So anyway, so now if we click on this thing, we're going to see we have an oil tank over here, The temperature is rising slowly, but it's not quite hot enough yet to start refining oils. So once the temperature gets to a certain point where it can refine, it will do so. However, we may not have enough pressure. All right, I've got 4 air compressors set up here, and I'm currently working on the Redstone Control, which is a little bit more complicated now, of course, because now we have 4 air compressors. So I've got a similar setup here. I've got my Steve's Factory Manager redstone emitter there, and then I've got some insulated redstone cable, Ender IO insulated redstone cable, connecting that to all of the other air compressors, so that if this one emits a signal, they will all get it. And then here I've got the redstone receiver receiving a redstone signal from the pressure gauge. And then here we've got the safety tube monitor receiving a signal from this redstone emitter. These are going to be inside the wall, so we won't be able to see those anymore. Now our pressure should increase much more quickly than it was before. And we should see the temperature of this guy starting to rise. Right now it's pretty much at room temperature. We've started refining. Yay! Not much, but just a tiny little bit. Our temperature is hovering around 99 degrees, and I think it needs to be, I think it's supposed to be at 100 or greater to refine. But our pressure is rising, but very slowly. This thing really uses a lot of pressure. But you can see a tiny little bit of fuel down there. A little bit of diesel, which we can actually use in a dynamo to generate electricity. However, we're not going to. We're going to convert it all into LPG. Is that what it's called again? Yeah, we're going to convert it all into LPG eventually. We're ready to start producing plastic. We've got coal and we've got LPG, which I'm piping. And this is in our thermo-pneumatic processing plant. I'm piping LPG into this guy. I dropped some coal in there. We've got pressure going into the back, and it seems to be grabbing heat from this. I wasn't sure if it would or not. But it is. And it's almost hot enough. Alright, now this guy is really hot. Hopefully not too hot. I'm not really sure what the threshold is for heat. But I noticed it's purple. Oh, but we got some liquid plastic. Yay! Awesome. Start making some plastic. I ended up setting up 4 tanks up here just because this thing was kind of a pain to interface with. So it's a lot easier to have the stuff in the tanks up here in the portable tanks. So I've got LPG here, we've got gasoline, kerosene, diesel. Right now we've got LPG. Well, we had LPG coming in here, which made a bunch of plastic, and then I have that piping out into our plastic mixer. We've got one of each of these dyes, or a bunch of each of these dyes, red rose, floral green, and lapis lazuli, and we just tell it what kind of plastic we want to make. And it takes some of the dye, it takes some of the liquid. I have 6 air compressors set up now because these guys, these vortex tubes, they suck a lot of pressure. I think we get 10 buckets of plastic for every bucket of LPG. So every 100 millibuckets gives us 1,000 millibuckets of liquid plastic plus 1 piece of coal. So 100 millibuckets and a piece of coal makes 1,000 millibuckets of liquid plastic. And then each bucket of liquid plastic makes 1 piece of plastic. I've got 4 of these thermo-pneumatic processing plants set up. This one is actually producing plastic from the LPG and some coal. This one is producing LPG from gasoline. However, it's not getting hot enough because we don't have enough pressure over here. I had to move everything because these vortex tubes, if you have them against a block, they're not as efficient. The cold side needs to like open air so that it can vent better. But it's still not getting hot enough because it's not getting enough pressure. This vortex tube can handle pressure up to 20 bar. So if we really want to get this thing working very efficiently, which we do eventually, we're going to want to start getting into our our advanced air compressors, which is going to require us to get into assembly controlling. However, before we do that, there's one thing that we can do right now that would be kind of fun and exciting and doesn't require us to build our assembly machine quite yet, and that is elevators. The elevator has basically three components. There's the elevator base, which requires plastic, and now we have tons of plastic. Our thing is filled with liquid plastic. I've got a barrel or a tank of liquid plastic up here, and this thing is full of liquid plastic. Got 4 elevator bases, 12 elevator shafts, and 3 elevator collars. Now the bases, of course, we put at the bottom of the shaft of the elevator, and the number of bases will determine how far the elevator can travel. I believe it's something like 5 blocks per base, because it's kind of a hydraulic thing, so the more bases you have, the further up it's going to be able to travel. And then we're going to need our elevator shafts. We just put these, all the way up. All the way up to the top of where we want our elevator to go. Cool. Probably have to replace that block with something that looks a little nicer. And then we're going to set up our elevator collars. Put one there. Okay, now I ran some pipes because we need pressure in this thing. I ran some pipes coming all the way from our room downstairs. And I've got the 3 elevator collars set up. Click right there, and it's going to bring us up. It's a little glitchy, but... Okay, why are we stopping here? I think I need to move that collar up 1 block. Whoa, I'm stuck. Okay, there we go. So let's just get this guy and put him right there. Alright, we can click there to call it up to the 3rd floor. You can hear it coming. Here it comes. Nice. There's our little elevator. Kind of glitchy. Now if we go down here, we can see the little hydraulic thingamajigger going all the way down, stretching all the way from the base up to the 3rd floor. Alright, let's go for a little ride. Down to level 2. Whee! It's too bad we can see inside our... It's all glitchy like that, though. That kind of a bummer, but all right. So now we'll head down to the basement. And once we get down to the bottom, I can show you how we configure this thing. Of course, I think we can do it from upstairs too. But we just right-click on the base, and we get this little interface. We've got upgrade slots on the left, so we can make it go faster because it is pretty slow. And then we've got our camo in the middle, which is basically the block it takes. So that changed the pattern for the shaft, and then the other slot will change the pattern for the base. And these are the upgrades we can do. There's our speed upgrade, and then we can also increase the volume. We can change the floor names. This is how I set the names to basement 2 we should actually call ground floor, and then 3 is technically the 2nd floor. And there we are. Nice. Let's head all the way up. Oh boy. That would be a bit of a give you a little bit of a queasiness if it was a real elevator, but hey, it's fun when you don't get stuck. Whee! Alright, there's our elevator. Our first PneumaticCraft toy. Alright, now that we've got our pneumatic fundamentals in place, we can start playing with some fun stuff, like the pneumatic helmet. However, we are out of time today, and we're gonna have to play around with that tomorrow, or at the next episode. But this helmet is pretty cool. It's kind of an Iron Man-like thing where it has overlays of information of things that you're looking at or that are around you in the world. So it should be pretty fun to play with. We're also going to possibly get into drones. That might happen the following episode, but we'll see how far we get. We'll be playing with some circuit boards and some assembly lines and some other fun mechanics. So I hope you join me for that, and I will see you next time. Click the like button if you enjoyed this, please, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.